Some films break you, and that is exactly the point. Most movies fade from memory within days, but 5 films on this list have stayed with people for decades. They do not entertain you, they confront you. Number 2 contains a single line that will change how you think about doing good. And the one at number 1 forces a question that has echoed for over 2,000 years. Number 1, 2,000 years later. This film still forces a question you cannot avoid. 2,000 years later, this account still confronts every person with a question that cannot be ignored. This film is not designed to entertain. It does not soften what it shows. From the beginning, you are watching the physical suffering of Jesus Christ, severe, relentless, and completely unjust. And the film refuses to look away, because softening the reality would destroy its meaning. The events portrayed are not fictional. They are rooted in the historical record of Scripture. What you are seeing is the final hours of Christ's earthly life, his arrest, his trial, his crucifixion. But the central question is not simply what happened. The question is why. Why would Christ willingly endure this? Not for personal gain, not to escape death, not because he was overpowered. Scripture is clear. He went willingly. And the answer is not love in some vague or sentimental sense. The Bible is more precise than that. He came to bear the punishment that sin required. This was not merely an act of sacrifice. It was a substitution. Christ took upon himself the judgment that belonged to sinners. And that is where the film stops being something you can watch from a distance. Because if this was done for sin, then the question becomes personal. The cross does not only reveal love, it reveals guilt, it reveals justice, it reveals the full cost of forgiveness. So the real question is not why he did it. The question is what you will do with what he has done. Number 2, one man saved over 1,000 lives, then said it was not enough. Oskar Schindler was not a hero at the start of this story. He was a war profiteer. He saw occupied Poland as a business opportunity. He used Jewish workers because they were cheap under Nazi rule. And then something shifted. Slowly, uncomfortably. He began to see people where others saw numbers. By the end of the war, Schindler had spent his entire fortune bribing Nazi officials to protect the lives of over 1,000 Jewish workers in his factory. He saved them, and then came the moment that changes everything. Standing outside after the war ended, surrounded by the people he protected, Schindler looks at his car and says, "I could have saved more." He looks at his Nazi pin, "One more person." He breaks down. That line said in a film about a real man based on real events has stayed with audiences for over 30 years because it forces the question outward, not at Schindler, at you. You have resources, you have time, you have choices every day about where those go. How much of what you have are you actually willing to give up to do real good? Most people never answer that honestly. This film makes it impossible to avoid. Number 3, it looks like a romance, but it is really about time running out. Everyone thinks they know what this film is. A love story, 2 young people, a summer that changes everything. And yes, that is part of it. But that is not the real story. The real story is what happens decades later when one of them can no longer remember who the other person is. That is where this film becomes something different. It becomes a question about the nature of love itself. Not the feeling of falling in love, but the choice to stay present when the person you love no longer recognizes your face. Think about what that actually means. You could have someone beside you every day, and they look at you like a stranger. That is not a romantic thought. It is one of the most painful things a person can face. And millions of families face some version of it, with dementia and memory loss every single year. The Notebook takes that reality and asks one quiet, devastating question. If everything that made your relationship what it was, the shared memories, the moments, the history, if all of that disappeared, would the love still be real? The answer this film gives is not easy, but it is one of the most honest things you will ever see on screen. Number 4. This movie exposes the real reason most marriages fall apart. Marriages rarely collapse because of a single catastrophic event. They deteriorate over time through patterns of selfishness, neglect, and sin, not dramatic moments, daily ones. A harsh word, a refusal to serve, a need dismissed again. Fireproof presents a marriage in exactly that condition. A husband and wife who are both convinced the other is at fault, and in many ways, both are correct. But the deeper issue is not compatibility. It is the condition of the heart. Scripture is clear that love is not merely a feeling. It does not rise and fall with circumstances. Love is a command. Love your wife as Christ loved the church. That is not a suggestion. That is a standard defined by sacrifice. The film introduces something called the Love Dare, a series of intentional acts of love carried out regardless of the other person's response. And that is where the message becomes significant, because it exposes something most people do not want to admit. We tend to love conditionally. We respond to kindness with kindness. We withdraw when we are wronged. But biblical love does not operate that way. It gives when there is no return. It serves when it is not appreciated. It remains when every feeling argues to leave, not because the other person deserves it, but because that is how Christ loves. So the question this film leaves you with is not whether you feel loved. The question is whether you will choose to love when it requires sacrifice, humility, and obedience. Number 5. One free man's kidnapping reveals how fragile freedom really is. Freedom feels permanent until someone takes it. Solomon Northup was a free black man living in New York with his wife and 2 children. In 1841, he was drugged, kidnapped, and sold into slavery in Louisiana. What followed was 12 years of brutality he had no legal way to escape. This film does not dramatize his suffering to make it feel distant. It forces you to sit inside it. There are scenes where the camera simply holds still. No music, no quick edits, just time passing in unbearable conditions. And that stillness is the point. Imagine spending a decade trying to prove who you are while everyone with power refuses to believe you. That is what this film puts you through. Director Steve McQueen based the film on Northup's own memoir, published in 1853. The events are documented. This is not fiction dressed up as history. It is history. What makes this film essential is the question it leaves behind. If your freedom depended entirely on a piece of paper and that paper was destroyed, what would you have left? Most people have never had to ask that question. This film makes sure you do. The most powerful stories are not the ones that comfort you, they are the ones that confront you. Pick one film from this list you have never seen and watch it this week, not for entertainment, but to let it ask you something. If you are someone who wants ideas that actually stay with you, subscribe. The next video goes even deeper into the stories that change how people see their lives.